From failed attempts at stealing secrets to deadly plots, this evil genius has had it rough. So rough, you might just root for him by the end. These are the times Plankton suffered in Bikini Bottom. Starting off with the episode Plankton's Regular, and this time he finally scores something no one saw coming, a customer who willingly comes back for seconds. Brace yourselves. It all starts with Plankton in his empty restaurant losing it over his zero customer status.
Same as always. Look! Empty again!
When a fish named Nat strolls in and actually orders a chum stick. My dude's in shock, practically convinced he's being pranked. But Nat genuinely seems to love the slimy snack, promising to come back for more the next day. Plankton is over the moon, bragging to Karen about his newfound success, though she's as unenthusiastic as ever. The next morning, Plankton waits by the door with a fresh chumstick for Nat, staring down the clock for hours until he falls asleep waiting. But just as he dozes off, Nat finally arrives, happily munches down his chumstick, and declares that Plankton's got himself a regular customer. Almost himself with joy, Plankton scuttles straight to the Krusty Krab to rub it in Krab's face, crowing about his new one-man empire. Krabs just laughs, gesturing to his packed restaurant until Nat, yes, Plankton's Nat, walks in and asks if Krabs serves chumsticks. Krabs looks horrified as Nat scoops Plankton up and carries him back to the chum bucket, while Plankton just gloats the whole way home.
I'll see you later, loser. Much later!
Krabs is losing his crap. He absolutely cannot stand the idea of Plankton having even one customer, so he orders SpongeBob to win Nat back with some aggressive Krabby Patty persuasion, like practically shoving the thing in his face. Nat's not interested though, and SpongeBob's attempts just leave Mr. Krabs in tears, desperate for a solution. SpongeBob suggests that Krabs make chum as good as Plankton's, which sparks an idea. Steal the recipe. This is a first in the history of Bikini Bottom. That night, Krabs sneaks into the chum bucket only to be caught in a security trap that pins him under a giant spoon, mirroring the way he had once trapped Plankton himself. I'ma just say this once. Karma. Our spongy boy tries to play peacemaker, but Plankton just scoops him under the spoon too. Just then, Karen interrupts to announce that Nat's on his way over with a fortune of cash. But when Nat arrives, he chucks the money at Karen, declaring he can't handle any more chum after needing his stomach pumped twice. Twice, people! Just as he's rushed out by paramedics for yet another stomach pumping, Plankton's dream of success shatters. In a final tiny twist of the knife, Karen reveals she's been paying Nat to eat the chum just to stop Plankton's whining about his empty restaurant. Karen shuts him down with a dry "cut it out," and Plankton's left feeling lower than low.
What? It's just obvious that I'm a complete failure.
Meanwhile, Krabs and SpongeBob are still stuck under the spoon, with Krabs gloating over Plankton's misery, laughing it up as SpongeBob just stares, thoroughly horrified by his boss's petty glee. And there it is, the saga of Plankton's one and only customer, ending in disaster, depression, and a reminder that sometimes, even in victory, Krabs manages to out-villain the actual villain. But of course, Plankton isn't done. And the algae's always greener, he's convinced that Mr. Krabs' life is all sunshine and dollar signs. Spoilers, it's not. And it all starts with a classic Plankton meltdown after yet another flop at snagging that Krabby Patty formula. Sick to death of his daily special, holographic meatloaf, Plankton wishes he could just swap lives with Mr. Krabs, which Karen points out he can, thanks to a conveniently forgotten invention, the transmogrifier. How the hell do you forget something like that? With the flick of a switch, Plankton says farewell to Karen with this nugget of gold.
Well, I hate to leave you, Karen, but you know what they say, a rolling stone gathers no algae.
Plankton wakes up in an alternate reality as none other than Mr. Plankton, suited up in Krabs' clothes, a nameplate announcing his new title, and a shiny little empire at his command. The first thing on his new billionaire agenda? A little bun inspection of some delicious Krabby Patties. But before he can even savor that first bite, alternate SpongeBob interrupts him, practically begging for a performance review. When Plankton mutters a half-assed, "too much sauce," SpongeBob loses it, spiraling into a dramatic mess of existential crisis. But just when Plankton thinks things can't get any frickin' weirder, Pearl walks in asking for an allowance. He throws her $1, which is basically Monopoly money to her. Here comes the waterworks. Then, an actual customer shows up to rail on Squidward's atrocious cooking.
What? It's just an ordinary Krabby. Oh my goodness!
While SpongeBob unravels because the order had one pickle too many. As Plankton is practically begging the universe to give him a break, an alarm siren blasts. Turns out in this bizarro universe, Krabs is now a ragged, crazed wannabe thief trying to steal his formula. And he's in his birthday suit, no less. Plankton watches in horror as SpongeBob arms himself with a clothes cannon, finally ensnaring Krabs in an underwired bra to a triumphant victory screech from the staff and customers alike.
Oh, you got me!
Krabs, shamelessly defiant, vows to keep coming back daily until he does manage to swipe a patty, leaving Plankton to wonder what kind of daily nightmare Krabs actually lives in. Realizing that this rich guy life is somehow even worse than holographic meatloaf, Plankton freaks the fudge out, disrobes in defeat, and slams the transmogrifier button to return to his own sad reality. When he pops back into the chum bucket, Plankton happily gulps down his holographic meatloaf, now somehow tolerable compared to what he just escaped. In one episode, Plankton learns the ultimate lesson. Be careful what you wish for, because even the perfect life can be its own flavor of insanity. Though, even after realizing that, Plankton is still back at it, turning to an unexpected ally in sweet and sour squid. It all starts with SpongeBob cheerily singing while grilling Krabby Patties, which is, of course, Squidward's cue to rain on the parade.
You wouldn't know what real music is if it came up and hit you in the face.
To prove his superiority, Squidward whips out his clarinet and serenades the restaurant. This is gonna end swell. Of course, customers practically stampede out the door. Krabs is not thrilled and orders him to cut it out, sending Squidward outside for a tantrum about how nobody appreciates his artistry, if you can even call it that. Plankton sees Squidward's meltdown from the chum bucket, and lightbulb moment, Squidward might be his ticket to the Krabby Patty formula. He makes his approach, attempting to win Squidward over with an array of hilariously desperate disguises. Girl Scout? Nope. Fellow octopus? Hard pass. Each attempt ends with Plankton's face getting the door treatment. After all this failure, SpongeBob, in his naive wisdom, suggests Plankton try complimenting Squidward's music. It's a terrible idea, which means Plankton's all in. Equipped with professional-grade earplugs, Plankton meets with Squidward, ready to butter him up. He endures the clarinet's screeching, feigning admiration as Squidward marches through town, clarinet in hand, like a one-man musical menace.
Sweet mother of Aphrodite! Please make it end!
Plankton even throws in a little song about Squidward's talent, oblivious to the fact that everyone else is practically in ear pain purgatory. It's all going according to plan, until Plankton makes the rookie mistake of mentioning the Krabby Patty formula. Squidward, intrigued but still blissfully out of the loop after 20 years on the job, claims he's never seen a Krabby Patty made. Inspired by Plankton's support, he decides he's ready to leave the Krusty Krab and make his musical career full-time, a terrifying notion for anyone within hearing range. Plankton, realizing this newfound confidence spells the end of his in at the Krusty Krab, loses his crap, causing his earplugs to fall out and leaving him defenseless against Squidward's melody. In desperation, Plankton grabs Squidward's clarinet, yelling,
Stop playing this infernal pipe! You're killing me!
And takes off, prompting a chase that ends when SpongeBob frees Squidward from Plankton's clutches. But Plankton's reprieve is short-lived as the police arrive, accusing him of a bad music crime. How the hell is that even a crime? Just whatever, moving on. They arrest him, having found him holding the clarinet as evidence, and as if to really hammer home the karma, they run over Squidward's clarinet with their car on the way out. The episode ends with Squidward grumbling that he hates people, while SpongeBob lovingly hands him the battered remains of his clarinet. For Plankton, it's another day. Another scheme destroyed by his own terrible taste and accomplices. And in Chum Bucket Supreme, his latest marketing strategy hinges on Patrick's single brain cell, leading to a disaster only a hockey team could finish off. The episode begins with two customers parking at the Chum Bucket, and Plankton's about ready to throw a parade, thinking he's finally got diners. Turns out they just needed a spot because the Krusty Krab's lot was packed. Karen, with her usual no-nonsense advice, suggests he advertise. So Plankton hangs a sign that says, "Chum is metabolic fuel." Enter Patrick, who wanders over and tries to read the sign, only to send his brain into full-on smoke alarm mode. It's so bad he has to pour kelp juice over his head to cool down. But Patrick, in a surprising stroke of genius, or sheer randomness, rearranges the letters into the much catchier "Chum is Fum." At first, Plankton is all like,
You changed my sign to Chum is Fum? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard!
my dude is about to eat his own words. The slogan goes viral in Bikini Bottom, and suddenly Plankton has a line out the door. He's so damn thrilled he hires Patrick as his slogan manager, making Patrick probably the first guy in history to get a job by accidentally starting a trend he didn't understand. Meanwhile, Krabs is panicked over the dwindling customers and assumes Plankton's finally stolen the Krabby Patty formula. So he and SpongeBob slap together some ridiculous disguise and march over to reclaim it, only for Plankton to call them out on their awful costume game. Once they figure out it's the slogan, not the chum, that's pulling in customers, they're horrified to watch as people chant "Chum is Fum" to choke down Plankton's horrifying food. Yikes. After some time, however, the slogan starts getting old, so Plankton and Patrick hold a board meeting to brainstorm a new catchphrase. 3 days later, Patrick finally drops his magnum opus, "Fum is Chum." It's somehow even worse, but the crowd loves it. Plankton's business booms, and he's suddenly in all the hottest restaurant magazines. Even a whole hockey team comes to eat at the Chum Bucket, which is pretty much a new high for Plankton. Patrick, however, decides he's burnt out from all the work, complete with a literal hole burned into his head. Plankton, frantic to keep him around, tries bluffing, telling Patrick he's totally replaceable. But in his rant, he accidentally flips on his restaurant's intercom and calls his beloved customers buffoons, morons, the dumbest of the dumb. You get the bloody idea. The customers are not amused, and they stampede out of the Chum Bucket in disgust. The episode wraps up with Patrick introducing a new Krusty Krab slogan, "Krabby Patties are Fum," drawing everyone back to Mr. Krabs' restaurant. And as the crowd cheers for the Krusty Krab, poor Plankton is left nursing his bruises and broken dreams once again. But just when he thinks he's seen the worst, Greasy Buffoons hits with a greasy free-for-all that pulls him straight into rock bottom, starting with SpongeBob's slick encounter at the Krusty Krab. This one is a doozy. Our poor little villain starts this episode just minding his own Chum Bucket business, and before he knows it, he's face-to-face with literal rock bottom. So SpongeBob slips on a slick puddle in the Krusty Krab. Turns out the grease trap hasn't been cleaned in a hot minute. Krabs, in typical Krabs fashion, ropes SpongeBob into cleaning it out, siphoning the whole thing into a tanker truck and dumping it out behind, you guessed it, the Chum Bucket. Krabs brushes it off as a minor gray area in waste management, but hey, Plankton's his sworn enemy, so it's practically charity, right? The next morning, Plankton is in for a shock. The grease from Krabs' kitchen has spread all over the Chum Bucket's back alley. But instead of grossing him out, it actually inspires him. He decides to use the leftover grease as a secret ingredient in his infamous chummy patties. And oh boy, the people of Bikini Bottom can't bloody well get enough. Suddenly there's a line around the block at the Chum Bucket, which leaves Mr. Krabs both horrified and insanely jealous. So what's a crabby crustacean to do? Krabs retaliates with a greasy twist of his own. He makes deluxe Krabby Patties dunked in even more grease to draw the customers back. Plankton spies this nonsense going down, declaring,
But he's a bigger fool than he realizes if he thinks old Plankton is gonna take this one lying down.
and let me tell you, Plankton is not about to take that lying down. He promptly jumps up with his spyglass and gets to work. He amps up the grease levels in his patties too, and soon both restaurants are in a full-out grease war, serving increasingly ridiculous items like yummy buns and, wow, soup, which is literally just a plate of grease. Now the entire town is looking sickly AF. SpongeBob is worried, and even Patrick is waddling around with a gut full of grease demanding more crunchity munchities. I'm gonna co-opt that phrase, that's bloody brilliant. SpongeBob's conscience finally gets the best of him, and he calls in the health inspector to shut down this grease fest once and for all. But Krabs and Plankton aren't having it. They stuff SpongeBob in a bin, knock him around, and roll him down a cliff in a desperate attempt to keep him quiet, which is extreme, to say the least. Eventually, though, the health inspector hears the truth, and he's not amused. He threatens to shut down both restaurants unless the grease gets cleaned up pronto. So Plankton, soaked in his own greasy defeat, gives up and leaves to go freshen up, while Krabs, in his moment of pure despair, gets a bright idea courtesy of SpongeBob. The next day, SpongeBob reappears, bloated beyond recognition from soaking up all the grease himself, proudly announcing the Krusty Krab is now grease-free. Cue Patrick, who waddles in, sees his grease-inflated best friend, and mistakes him for another crunchity-munchity snack. Poor SpongeBob runs for dear life as Patrick licks his greasy trail behind him, leaving Mr. Krabs with a mind spinning with new greasy ideas. And there you have it. Plankton's little grease gamble ends with him losing, covered in sludge, and Krabs still dreaming up his next greasy scheme. You'd think things couldn't get messier, but Chum Caverns takes Plankton to a whole new low, underground to be exact, while Krabs is busy handcuffing customers and squeezing every penny he can. Krabs is doing his usual money-grubbing routine at the Krusty Krab, forcing customers to order sides, handcuffing people to the boat for even thinking of walking away without buying something, and doubling SpongeBob's workload because, well, 2 spatulas equal twice the money, right? He heads to his office for his daily dive into profits and stumbles over a loose floorboard, revealing the holy grail itself, the Krabby Patty's secret formula. Quick on his feet, Krabs hammers it back down, totally unaware he's just given Plankton a massive-ass lead. Over at the Chum Bucket, Plankton's been spying with this ridiculous telescope that goes straight into the Krusty Krab chimney. How the hell he pulled that off is a bloody mystery. When he sees where the formula's hidden, he's instantly ready to dig his way underground to snag it. But in classic Plankton style, his plan doesn't exactly go off without a hitch. First, he crashes into a boulder, then after digging deeper, he finds himself in a hidden, glistening cave. As Plankton gapes at the stunning underground scenery, Karen, the actual brains behind the bucket, suggests he uses the place to lure customers. Ignoring her as usual, Plankton comes up with the idea all by himself, but Karen knows better. And so do we, my man. Enter the Cave Dwellers, creepy but oddly charming creatures who start lurking around. Plankton, armed with a tiny whip, tames these cave dwellers and puts them to work. Next thing you know, the Chum Caverns are open for business, and Plankton's finally got a crowd. Mr. Krabs is fuming when he sees his precious customers flocking to the competition. Even SpongeBob rocks up. Okay, but I couldn't help myself with that pun. Ordering chum nuggets, and Plankton is so chuffed he takes the money himself, openly gloating,
Eat your twisted, blackened, money-grubbing heart out, Krabs.
Krabs is obviously furious. He marches into the caves himself, ready to reclaim his spot as Bikini Bottom's top dog. But Plankton's had enough of Krabs, so he decides to trap his arch-nemesis in the depths of the cave. The two of them go at it, trying to trap each other with every rock and shovel in sight. Finally, their battle ends in a standstill where they're both hopelessly stuck underground. Sitting there in defeat, they have a rare heart-to-heart, blaming their never-ending feud for their current predicament. Totally correct, but let's see how long it lasts. Just as they're starting to work together, well, kinda, SpongeBob shows up to save them, bringing them back to the surface. But the truce is short-lived. Plankton immediately tries to use his newfound knowledge to swipe the formula once more. The minute he pops above ground, though, he triggers an avalanche that buries the Krusty Krab, Plankton, Mr. Krabs, and a good chunk of Bikini Bottom back into the caves. Holy crap, dude. Trapped with no way out, the customers complain, but one optimistically points out that they're in the Krusty Krab. Krab sees dollar signs when he realizes he's got customers stuck right where he wants them. Unfortunately, he's also missing Squidward to man the register, so who better than Plankton to step up? The episode ends with the cave dwellers whipping Plankton into shape as the new cashier, proving that somehow he's even worse off than Squidward. But Plankton's back with another brilliant plan. Spongicus finds him swapping Krabby Patty secrets for Roman gladiators, convinced that free entertainment will take down Mr. Krabs. Yep, nothing says success like a do-it-yourself Coliseum. Forget the Krabby Patty secret formula. This time, Plankton's bringing out the big guns, free entertainment. And not just any entertainment, he's got a whole arena showdown lined up with promises of blood, guts, and glory. The crowd's hyped, Mr. Krabs' wallet is practically quaking, and Plankton, he's feeling like a real emperor on his little throne, toga and all. The Bikini Bottom residents flood into Plankton's revamped Chum Coliseum, completely abandoning the Krusty Krab. Krabs, feeling his pocketbook emptying by the minute, drags SpongeBob and Squidward to investigate what's lured away his cash cows. Meanwhile, Patrick is the day's main entertainment. The poor guy is tied up with a ring of blood sausages around his neck, facing off against a lionfish that's ready to pounce. It's not looking good. SpongeBob, seeing Patrick on the verge of becoming lionfish chow, springs into action like the gladiator hero he never asked to be. Armor? Check. Chariot? Check. Seahorse steeds? Absolutely. But instead of the guts and glory Plankton promised, this turns into a slapstick chase scene with SpongeBob rescuing Patrick and both of them zooming around the arena. The crowd is not impressed. Even Betsy Krabs is disappointed, yelling for more blood because apparently this is how everyone in Bikini Bottom blows off steam. Desperate, Plankton tries to sell his infamous chum sticks to the hungry crowd, but when he has the audacity to charge $10 a piece, chum isn't even worth 10 cents, let's be real, people start booing him harder than the lionfish. Someone calls him out saying a Krabby Patty is only $1, and Mr. Krabs just about chokes on his glee. As customers start bailing on this low-budget gladiator nightmare, Plankton has a full-on meltdown, slamming the door shut and trapping everyone inside until they either eat chum or starve. Finally, after 20 years of watching Krabs pack his restaurant, he's got a full house and they're gonna stay put. SpongeBob then realizes it's the sausages around Patrick's neck that the lionfish really wants, so he chucks them over to Plankton's imperial throne, sending the lionfish into full berserker mode. And now Plankton is the new target. With his Coliseum in ruins and a literal lionfish breathing down his neck, Plankton escapes through a secret door he conveniently placed for just such an occasion. He's super proud of his crafty escape, even hollering to the lionfish on the other side of the door,
Try and catch me now, you prissy feline!
Yet, right after he says this, the lionfish punches through the wall, because duh, it's made out of bloody sand, and now royally pissed, continues its pursuit of Plankton. Back at the Krusty Krab, the crowd's flocked back, and Krabs, quick to cash in on a good disaster, has upped the price of a Krabby Patty to $10. When a customer complains, Mr. Krabs points to his new financial advisor. Yep, the same lionfish. And suddenly that price hike makes a lot more sense to them. They all share a laugh, but it's clear Plankton's free entertainment experiment left him with nothing but bruises, an angry fish on his tail, and maybe a little less dignity. But his schemes are far from over because in Plankton, he's about to face a new low, starting with a Krabby Patty trick that'll leave him and us cringing. We're at the Krusty Krab, where Squidward sends an order for a Krabby Patty over to SpongeBob, who somehow makes the patty come out of Squidward's nose. Yes, we're already off to a bizarre start. But things only get weirder when this patty starts sliding across the floor all by itself, heading straight for freedom. I'm sure we can all guess who's behind this escapade. Plankton, the master of micro heists, riding the patty like a stolen skateboard. Mr. Krabs is already way ahead of him and stops him in his tracks, flinging him back to the chum bucket while Plankton shrieks his typical, "I'll be back!" threats. It's clear from Mr. Krabs' dramatic monologue that Plankton's been trying this scheme and failing for years. The dude's resilient, if nothing else. Later that night, the Krusty Krab closes and SpongeBob says goodbye to Mr. Krabs and heads off, blissfully unaware of the chaos that's about to come his way. Plankton, who was probably lurking in a nearby drain pipe, corners SpongeBob and goes for a Hail Mary attempt to weasel his way into SpongeBob's good graces. He's rambling about being fellow invertebrates, as if that's a solid basis for friendship, and even claims it's his birthday tomorrow, which SpongeBob, bless his innocent heart, actually considers. Plankton hands our spongy boy a golden spatula, calling it a friendly gift, then not so subtly requests a Krabby Patty in return. SpongeBob, in a rare burst of righteous fury, shuts him down, calling out Plankton's obvious plot and refusing to hand over a patty, birthday or not. But Plankton, being, well, Plankton, isn't letting this go so easily. And then it happens. That night, while SpongeBob is fast asleep, Plankton busts out the real horror show plan, saying,
SpongeBob, you will be mine.
Talk about stalker vibes, yikes. He crawls right into SpongeBob's head through a pore, attaches a mind control device to his brain, and takes over. Cue SpongeBob's zombified stroll through Bikini Bottom, smashing his way into Squidward's house just to insult him on Plankton's orders, then popping over to Patrick's place to fling him aside like a beach ball. Poor SpongeBob is fully aware of what's happening, but can only watch in horror as Plankton marches him, puppet style, into the Krusty Krab, snags a Krabby Patty, and heads back to the chum bucket to gloat. Plankton's got a full analyzer ready, primed to spill the formula's secrets, and he's living his best evil scientist life, finally believing he's won. But then, just as SpongeBob's mourning his failure to protect the beloved patty, his over-the-top adoration for its succulence distracts Plankton. In a burst of pure hunger, or pure stupidity, Plankton launches himself at the patty, but the leap goes about as well as his other plans. He bounces off the patty, lands straight into his analyzer, and is promptly sucked into his own computer screen. SpongeBob, now free, is beaming as he skips off with a Krabby Patty, leaving Plankton yelling from the chum bucket, "I'll settle for some fries!" It's a fitting finale. For once, Plankton literally becomes trapped in his own plans. But if you thought that was rough, one-course meal shows just how far Mr. Krabs is willing to go to keep Plankton miserable. And trust me, he goes way too far. So Mr. Krabs is luxuriating in his usual money bath when he smells something burning. Naturally, it's Plankton, and he's brought a bunch of explosives to blow up the Krusty Krab. His plan actually works this time, and he even manages to capture both Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. With Krabs tied up, Plankton breaks out his newest torture technique, tickling him with a feather. But just as SpongeBob accidentally blabs the Krabby Patty formula's hiding spot, Pearl, the actual ticking time bomb in this episode, shows up in the kitchen. Turns out Plankton is utterly petrified of whales, and one look at Pearl sends him bolting back to the chum bucket in total panic mode. After that embarrassing fiasco, Plankton spills his guts to Karen, revealing that he's haunted by a whale-related trauma, having lost family members to the terrifying sea giants. Karen's sympathetic response, basically deal with it, there are no whales here, before going back to her own business. So much for empathy, but I guess she is a robot. Mr. Krabs, sensing an opportunity, decides to play guerrilla tactics, borrowing one of Pearl's dresses and crafting an absolutely diabolical plan. Thus begins Plankton's descent into madness. Krabs, disguised as Pearl, terrorizes him over 2 straight weeks, with whale-sized jump scares and relentless threats. It's a psychological horror show as Plankton's nerves unravel and his days turn into a nightmare montage of this whale lurking around every corner. It gets so bad he even has visions of a demon-like Pearl hunting him, complete with his kin getting eaten. At this point, you're practically rooting for Plankton to get a break. My dude even asks Karen to bring his meals to him because
I can't risk stepping into the light. The whale might see me.
breaking down into tears at the thought. But then, in a soul-crushing twist, he learns that it's been Krabs the whole time, disguised and loving every second of Plankton's misery. As if that wasn't enough, things get so dark that Plankton winds up laying in the street waiting to be run over by a bus. Shame, Bra needs some therapy. SpongeBob stumbles on this mess and finally confronts Mr. Krabs about his villainy, only for Krabs to throw the Krabby Patty formula rulebook in his face. Since Mr. Krabs is clearly immune to basic empathy, SpongeBob decides to spill the beans on his boss's one true fear: mimes. This is where Plankton, who's practically reborn at this revelation, gets a new lease on life, plotting his revenge with a French mime straight out of Krabs' nightmares. When Krabs eventually catches on, SpongeBob decides to bring things full circle by chasing Plankton away with holographic whales, sending him scrambling for his life once again. And while Krabs is eventually freed, the real kick to the nuts is that the mime doesn't leave, leaving Mr. Krabs to deal with his own haunting. Honestly, Course doesn't even begin to cover it. This episode is more like Krabs doing psychological warfare on Plankton with no regrets. With Mr. Krabs running full-scale mind games, you start wondering if they were ever even friends. Friend or Foe finally gives us the backstory, showing how these two went from best buddies to sworn enemies. The rivalry that launched 1,000 Krabby Patty heists starts with a dream of friendship and a homemade burger stand, believe it or not. But of course, things spiraled out of control in true SpongeBob fashion, taking us on a back-and-forth journey through two of the most contradictory origin stories, well, ever. We start with Patchy the Pirate and Potty the Parrot trying to channel their inner SpongeBob by working at a restaurant called The Poop Deck, where Patchy's patty-making skills are questionable, to put it nicely. Potty, with his assistant manager badge and his book smarts, critiques Patchy's cooking so hard that Patchy ends up chucking rotten patties at him, which leads to his boss firing both of them. It's a bit of a train wreck, but the perfect setup to introduce the juicy history of Mr. Krabs and Plankton's broken bromance. Potty rolls the clip on his chaotic origin story, and here we go! Flashback time. In a rare scene of vulnerability, Mr. Krabs explains to SpongeBob that he and Plankton were actually best buds from the day they hatched, which is somehow both adorable and mind-bending. Both were the class rejects, Krabs the raggedy kid who was always broke, and Plankton the bookish nerd everyone avoided. They were bullied, they were broke, but at least they had each other. In a heartwarming twist, Krabs even finds a lucky penny and, instead of hoarding it, spends it on a balloon for Plankton. Where did that Krabs go, man? Their friendship was all sunshine and pickles until a disgusting burger from the town's actual worst restaurant, Stinky's, sparked an entrepreneurial spirit in them. Fueled by a desire for revenge and respect, Krabs and Plankton opened their first burger joint at a literal dump. The Plab Patty, a Krabby Patty prototype they cook up, unsurprisingly awful. But the kids have no choice. It's the only place to eat now that Stinky's got shut down for health violations. Despite the unique location and toxic flavor, the stand thrives. But then everything falls apart when Krabs and Plankton's ambitions clash. Krabs wants customer satisfaction, but Plankton's got that classic villain urge to conquer the masses. Cue evil laugh. They fight over the recipe, rip it in half, and Plankton stomps off with his piece, vowing he'll get back at Krabs someday. After a quick commercial break, we get Plankton's side of the story because, duh, he thinks Krabs is the bad guy. According to Plankton, it was Krabs who wanted power and riches while he just wanted to serve happy customers. But wait, enter Karen, the literal voice of reason who rolls footage from their third date, or security recording, and sets the record straight. Both of them are lying through their greedy little teeth. It turns out, after accidentally seasoning their burger with junk, the Krabby Patty recipe was born, and Mr. Krabs' empire took off while Plankton's chum ideas, well, you can imagine. The episode ends on a classic note. Plankton and Krabs briefly softening towards each other, with Plankton even admitting that
My life has been nothing but a long line of disappointment since we became enemies.
Yikes, brah. It's so true it hurts. Gets me in the feels. However, they immediately fall back into their scheming ways as Plankton tries one last time to steal the formula. They're running in circles around the Krusty Krab while poor SpongeBob watches, probably thinking, well, so much for reconciliation. And there you have it. Maybe that's why Plankton is so hell-bent on getting himself in trouble. But hey, I'm just a guy who likes cartoons. Catch you in the next video.